Hello, and welcome to Story Verdict. Today I'm going to tell you the story of the useless wife and the CEO who called her boss. The story goes like this. The night my husband called me useless in front of 200 guests. I was carrying a silver serving tray with a bottle of champagne balanced in the center, wearing a plain black dress his mother had chosen because she said anything elegant would make me forget my place, and standing 5 feet away from the woman he intended to marry before our divorce papers were even dry. Marcus did not introduce me as his wife when he took the stage beneath the crystal chandeliers of Maison Étoile, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. He introduced me as someone who had helped around the house during a difficult period, as though 5 years of marriage could be reduced to a temporary domestic arrangement, and as though the wedding ring still resting on my finger meant nothing more than a stain he had forgotten to remove. Then he placed one hand on the waist of Vanessa, the 28-year-old daughter of a major investor, raised his champagne glass to the shareholders seated before him, and announced that she was the strategic partner who would stand beside him during the next chapter of his career. The applause came quickly, because most people in that room depended on Marcus's company for money, contracts, or access. And wealthy people have always understood that clapping at the right moment is easier than asking the wrong question. I remained near the service station, because Marcus had ordered me there before dinner. He said the blue dress I originally chose looked too cheap for the photographs, and that my presence beside him would remind everyone he had married below his station. His mother, Evelyn, had leaned close enough for me to smell the rose perfume she wore and whispered, "At least the staff table suits you. You've spent 5 years living off our family, so serving one meal should not be difficult." I said nothing. Silence had become the only thing in our marriage that still belonged entirely to me. When the first course ended, Marcus asked the maitre d' to bring me forward. For one foolish second, I thought he might finally acknowledge our anniversary. The event had originally been presented to me as a celebration of 5 years of marriage, combined with his promotion to executive director of Halcyon Technologies, a position he believed would place him one step away from becoming chief executive officer. I had arranged the flowers, approved the wine list, corrected errors in the guest schedule, and quietly paid the deposit when Marcus's corporate account failed to clear. He did not know I had paid it. He assumed the restaurant had extended him credit because of his growing influence. In truth, the restaurant belonged to a hospitality group controlled by one of my companies, and the payment had moved from one account I owned into another. I had spent years making his life appear effortless, while he convinced himself ease was evidence of genius. When I reached the front of the ballroom, Marcus did not offer me a seat. He lifted a cream envelope from the podium and dropped it onto the tray I held. The edge struck the champagne bottle, making the glass ring sharply enough to silence several nearby conversations. "Sign it," he said. I looked at the envelope but did not touch it. "What is it?" He smiled toward the guests, as if he were performing a charming joke. "Our divorce agreement. I thought it would be fitting to handle unfinished business before celebrating the future." Vanessa lifted her left hand. A diamond ring glittered beneath the lights, though Marcus had not yet made the public proposal. Evelyn laughed softly. Someone near the stage gasped, but no one intervened. Marcus continued, "You have been given a comfortable life for 5 years, Clara. A house you could never afford, clothes you did not earn, access to people who would never have noticed you otherwise. The agreement is generous, considering you contributed nothing." I looked at him and remembered the first winter of our marriage, when I sold government bonds to cover the payroll of the small software company his father left behind. I remembered sitting alone in the kitchen at 3 a.m, restructuring corporate debt under an anonymous investment vehicle, so Marcus would never have to admit his company was 72 hours from bankruptcy. I remembered refusing a public board appointment at Phoenix Capital because he said my business travel made him feel neglected. I remembered directing my executives from a locked laundry room while he entertained investors in the living room with strategies I had written for him the night before. Marcus believed I contributed nothing because I had allowed him to believe success followed him naturally. That was my mistake. Not because generosity was wrong, but because I had confused protecting his pride with protecting our marriage. "Read it," Evelyn said. "Perhaps then you'll understand how fortunate you are that we are not charging you for the years we fed and housed you." I opened the envelope and read the first page while the tray rested against my palms. The settlement offered me $20,000 in exchange for surrendering all claims against Halcyon Technologies, the house, the vehicles, and every asset accumulated during our marriage. It also required me to sign a confidentiality agreement stating that I had never participated in any business decisions involving Halcyon. Marcus had added a clause identifying me as voluntarily unemployed and financially dependent. He wanted a legal record saying I had spent 5 years doing nothing. "You should be grateful," Vanessa said. Her voice carried easily through the microphone near the podium. "Most men would not offer that much to someone without a career." I looked at her. She wore a red silk gown, diamond earrings, and the confident smile of a woman who believed she had won something valuable. She knew Marcus was married. She had attended dinner in my home, complimented food I cooked, and once asked me for advice on selecting a birthday gift for him while they were already sleeping together. I did not hate her. Hatred would have required believing she had taken something I still wanted. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. Marcus's eyebrows rose. He had prepared himself for tears, anger, or pleading. He wanted me to create a scene so he could use my humiliation as proof that leaving me was necessary. My calm unsettled him. Evelyn removed a gold fountain pen from her handbag and placed it on the tray. "Try not to stain anything," she said. I set the tray on the edge of the podium, turned to the final page, and signed the name Clara Miller in the space indicated. Then, beside my signature, I drew a small phoenix with 3 rising wings and a circle beneath its heart. To everyone else, it looked like an insignificant flourish. To the legal and financial systems connected to Phoenix Capital, it was a control mark used only by the fund's ultimate owner. The symbol authenticated emergency directives issued outside secure channels. It was the mark attached to acquisitions, voting instructions, asset seizures, and capital freezes. Fewer than 12 people in the world knew what it meant. Marcus was not one of them. "What is that?" he asked. "A reminder," I said. "Of what?" I returned the pen to Evelyn. "That ashes are not the end of every story." She rolled her eyes. Marcus signed beneath my name without reading the symbol carefully. Vanessa applauded first. Several guests followed because they assumed the performance had reached its intended conclusion. Marcus stepped toward Vanessa and reached into his jacket for the ring box. I lifted the tray again and walked away before he could ask her to marry him. He called my name once, irritated that I had disrupted the timing of his announcement, but I did not turn around. I crossed the ballroom while people avoided my eyes. Some looked embarrassed on my behalf. Others looked relieved that the humiliation belonged to someone else. At the service corridor, a young waiter named Daniel opened the door and whispered that he was sorry. I thanked him. That small act of kindness nearly broke the control I had maintained through the entire evening. I entered the employee changing room. I removed the wedding ring Marcus had given me and placed it inside the pocket of the black dress. I kept only the narrow gold ring hanging from a chain around my neck. It had belonged to my mother, the only object of hers I still possessed. When I was a child, she told me the ring represented endurance because gold could be bent, heated, buried, and recovered without losing its nature. She died before Phoenix Capital existed, before Marcus, before I learned that endurance without boundaries could become another form of self-destruction. Outside, rain covered the city in silver lines. I stepped beneath the restaurant awning with no umbrella and heard the ballroom erupt in applause behind me as Marcus completed his proposal. The sound followed me to the curb. A black Rolls-Royce waited half a block away, parked beneath a darkened office building. The driver left the car and opened the rear door before I reached it. "Good evening, Ms. Vale," he said, using the surname attached to my private corporate identity. "Mr. Bennett is on the secure line." I entered the car, closed the door, and finally allowed myself to breathe. The interior smelled of leather and cedar. A tablet rested on the seat beside me, displaying the phoenix symbol I had drawn on the divorce papers. Beneath it, a message read, "Off penetration confirmed, freeze protoled ready." I pressed the call button. Adrian Bennett's face appeared on the screen. He was 63, silver-haired, careful, and feared across the financial world as the legendary chief executive officer of Phoenix Capital. Business magazines called him the architect of recovery because he specialized in acquiring failing corporations and rebuilding them into industry leaders. Marcus had framed one of Adrian's magazine covers and hung it in his office. He regularly quoted Adrian during speeches, never knowing the man he worshipped had spent 15 years answering to me. "Clara," Adrian said, his voice controlled but warm, "are you safe?" "Yes." The signed document was scanned the moment their attorney uploaded it. "Your control mark is valid. Shall I activate the full directive?" Rain moved down the window beside me. Through the glass, I could see the upper floors of Maison Étoile glowing like a jewel. Inside, Marcus was probably accepting congratulations, believing he had removed the final inconvenience from his life. For 5 years, I had softened every consequence before it reached him. I had preserved his company, paid his debts, secured his home, financed his expansion, protected his reputation, and allowed him to mistake the absence of disaster for proof that he could not fail. The silence that protected him had become a weapon against me. "Activate the freeze protocol," I said. Adrian did not ask whether I was certain. He had warned me years earlier that Marcus's behavior was becoming dangerous, but he respected my decision to remain private. Scope: everything linked to Marcus, Evelyn, Vanessa, and Halcyon's current executive agreements. Suspend personal credit guarantees. Withdraw discretionary support. Lock Phoenix voting rights. Cancel the promotion pending an emergency board review. Adrian's eyes hardened slightly. And the residence? The mansion Marcus called his belonged to Solstice Residential Holdings, a Phoenix subsidiary. He believed it had been purchased through a family trust after our wedding. I had acquired it when his mortgage application failed because of concealed business debts. I allowed him to think his parents provided the house because admitting the truth would have humiliated him. "Terminate occupancy authorization," I said. "Inventory their belongings and remove them tonight. Follow the law. No damage, no unnecessary cruelty. The security team can arrive within 40 minutes. Give them 2 hours." Adrian nodded and began entering instructions. "Maison Étoile has requested authorization for the event charges. Marcus's corporate card is linked to a Phoenix-backed credit facility. Would you like the payment rejected?" I thought of the vintage champagne, the imported flowers, the private musicians, the gold place settings, and the menu Marcus selected because he believed expensive things could disguise emptiness. The final invoice would exceed $300,000. I had approved the credit line that made such spending possible. "Reject it," I said. "The restaurant should require settlement before guests leave." "Understood. Do not penalize the restaurant staff. Pay wages and gratuities from my account." "Already arranged." Adrian studied my face. "Do you want me to come tonight?" "No. Tomorrow morning will be enough. The board has been waiting for your return." "Then tell them the wait is over." His expression softened. "Welcome back, boss." The word carried more weight than I expected. For 5 years, I had heard useless, dependent, provincial, embarrassing, fortunate, and burden. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be addressed by someone who knew exactly what I had built. I ended the call and leaned back against the seat while the car moved into traffic. I did not cry until we crossed the river. The tears came silently, not because I regretted activating the protocol, but because part of me still remembered the young man Marcus had been when we met. He had not always been cruel. That truth made his betrayal more painful, not less. We met at a public library 12 years earlier, before anyone associated either of us with wealth. I was 24, living in a studio apartment above a repair shop and working as a junior financial analyst for a regional bank. Marcus was 27 and trying to save a small software business inherited from his father. He occupied the same corner table every evening, surrounded by spreadsheets, unpaid invoice, and technical manuals. I noticed him because he drank the cheapest coffee from the vending machine and always gave half his sandwich to the homeless man outside. One night, he asked whether I understood cash flow statements. I said I understood them better than most people understood their families. He laughed and showed me the company records. The business was collapsing, but the technology had value. I spent 3 hours explaining how he could renegotiate supplier terms, separate profitable contracts, and stop borrowing short-term money to cover long-term losses. He listened without interrupting. The next week, he returned with updated numbers and a small bouquet of supermarket flowers. "You saved 10 jobs," he said. "I only explained the problem. No one else bothered." He courted me with patience rather than extravagance. We ate in cheap restaurants, walked through public parks, and discussed the companies we might build if money were not an obstacle. Marcus said he wanted to create technology that made ordinary businesses stronger. I said I wanted to build a fund that invested in people ignored by traditional institutions. He admired my ambition then, or perhaps he admired it while my success remained theoretical. My own rise began quietly. At the bank, I identified several distressed companies whose assets were worth more than their debts. Senior managers dismissed my analysis because I lacked the right educational pedigree and came from a poor neighborhood. I invested my savings through a small private entity and convinced 2 former clients to join me. The first company recovered within 18 months, the second tripled in value. I named the fund Phoenix Capital, because my mother used to say our lives could be burned without being finished. Adrian Bennett joined during the 3rd year. He had been pushed out of a major investment bank after exposing executive fraud. I offered him control over public operations, while I remained chief investment architect and majority owner. The arrangement protected my privacy and allowed him to become the visible leader Phoenix needed. We developed a reputation for rescuing companies without destroying their workers. Within 10 years, the fund managed billions. I never hid the work from Marcus in the beginning. I told him I ran an investment partnership, though I did not disclose the full size because Phoenix's ownership structure was confidential. He encouraged me until my earnings surpassed his. Then his questions changed. He asked why Adrian appeared in magazines while I remained invisible. He said perhaps my contribution was less important than I believed. When Phoenix acquired a major competitor of Halcyon, Marcus accused me of trying to control his industry. I assured him the deal had nothing to do with him. He said powerful husbands did not live comfortably with wives who could publicly overrule them. We were engaged by then. I loved him and believed partnership required compromise. I reduced my public involvement, transferred executive authority to Adrian, and worked from home under layers of confidentiality. Marcus said he felt respected again. Our wedding followed 6 months later. At first, I considered the retreat temporary. I continued directing investments through secure calls and encrypted reports while presenting myself socially as a homemaker. Marcus's mother believed I had resigned from the bank because I lacked discipline. When she asked what I did all day, I said I managed personal investments. She laughed and told her friends I played with household budgets. Marcus never corrected her. During the 2nd year of our marriage, Halcyon faced another crisis. A product failure triggered lawsuits, investors fled, and banks refused further lending. Marcus came home one evening shaking with anger and fear. He said the board intended to remove him. I spent the night reviewing Halcyon's books. The company had valuable patents but terrible debt. Phoenix could stabilize it through a capital injection and equity purchase, but Marcus would never accept the investment if he knew I controlled the fund. His pride had become more fragile than the company. I instructed Adrian to approach through intermediaries. Phoenix has acquired 51% of Halcyon's voting shares in exchange for refinancing the debt, preserving the workforce, and retaining Marcus as president. The agreement saved the company. Marcus returned home after the board vote and told me he had negotiated the greatest deal of his career. He says Phoenix's mysterious leadership recognized his brilliance. I congratulated him. That lie became the foundation of his arrogance. Over the following years, he attributed every success enabled by Phoenix to his own strategy. Our analysts corrected his expansion plans without receiving credit. I rejected reckless proposals privately and allowed the board to present safer alternatives as collaborative decisions. When Marcus demanded corporate aircraft access, I approved it temporarily. When he wanted the mansion, I acquired it through Solstice and structured an occupancy benefit. When he accumulated personal debt entertaining potential investors, Phoenix guaranteed the credit line. I did these things because I believed his confidence would eventually become real competence. Instead, protection convinced him that consequences belonged only to lesser people. His family's treatment of me worsened as his status improved. Evelyn came from modest wealth, but behaved as though generations of royalty flowed through her veins. She criticized my accent, clothes, friends, and habit of cooking for myself. She said women of her class did not perform domestic tasks, though she expected me to perform them for her. Marcus's sister, Lydia, regularly borrowed my jewelry without asking, and once told a guest I had married into the family after working as Marcus's bookkeeper. When I corrected her, Marcus said I was too sensitive. At family dinners, they asked whether I intended to find real employment. I would glance at Marcus, waiting for him to defend me. He usually smiled and said, "Clara prefers a quiet life." That sentence erased me more effectively than any direct insult. I lacked ambition. I had chosen it because he asked me to preserve his pride. Yet each year, he treated the sacrifice as proof that I had never possessed anything worth surrendering. The affair with Vanessa began during the final year of our marriage. She represented Cole Strategic Partners, a fund seeking influence over Halcyon. Her father's firm controlled only 6% of the company, but Vanessa behaved as though she could appoint executives with a glance. She praised Marcus publicly, repeated his ideas as if they were revolutionary, and encouraged him to resist Phoenix's oversight. He enjoyed being admired by someone who did not know how often his decisions required correction. I noticed changes long before I found evidence. He began dressing differently, locking his phone, attending meetings that never appeared on corporate calendars, and returning home carrying perfume that was not mine. When I asked whether he was unhappy, he said my insecurity exhausted him. He accused me of jealousy because Vanessa possessed the confidence I lacked. I almost told him the confidence he admired was funded by a family fortune smaller than the annual revenue of one Phoenix subsidiary, but the truth felt vulgar in that moment. I wanted him to choose me without knowing I held the power he worshipped. That desire kept me silent long after silence stopped being noble. 3 months before the anniversary dinner, Marcus asked me to sign documents renouncing any marital interest in Halcyon stock. He claimed the papers were routine requirements connected to his promotion. I reviewed them and discovered language allowing him to transfer compensation and future options into a trust controlled by Vanessa. He had already planned our divorce. I did not confront him. Instead, I ordered Phoenix's legal team to audit every transaction involving him. The results were worse than infidelity. Marcus had attempted to use company guarantees for personal real estate, diverted consulting fees toward accounts connected to Vanessa, and promised Cole Strategic Partners privileged access to Halcyon patents if they supported his appointment as chief executive. He believed Phoenix was a faceless institution too distant to notice. Adrian recommended immediate removal. I refused. "I need to hear the truth from him," I said. "You already have the truth. I have documents. I want to know whether he will still choose betrayal when I am standing in front of him." Adrian looked at me with the sadness of someone watching an intelligent person negotiate with pain. "And if he does, then I stop protecting him." The anniversary invitation arrived 2 weeks later. Marcus described it as a celebration of our marriage and his promotion. For a moment, I wondered whether he intended to confess, apologize, and rebuild. That hope survived until the morning of the event, when I found Vanessa's engagement ring receipt in his jacket. I still attended because I wanted the end to occur in the light. He gave me that. By the time the Rolls-Royce reached my private residence, the freeze protocol had begun. The house was a penthouse above Phoenix Tower, maintained for me throughout the marriage, but rarely used. I entered through a private elevator and found Adrian's chief of staff, Maya Torres, waiting with tea, clean clothes, and a stack of documents. Maya had worked with me for 9 years and knew better than to offer empty reassurance. She took my wet coat and said, "Halcyon's emergency board meeting is scheduled for 7 in the morning. The restaurant has attempted 3 charges. All were declined. Marcus is currently arguing with the general manager." A security feed appeared on the wall screen. The ballroom guests remained seated while restaurant staff blocked the exits discreetly. Marcus stood near the payment terminal, red-faced, surrounded by Evelyn, Vanessa, and several executives. He tried one card after another. Each failed. Vanessa called her father, who refused to cover the bill after learning Phoenix had suspended all Halcyon credit support. Marcus demanded to speak with the restaurant's owner. The manager explained that Maison Étoile required immediate payment because the host's corporate account no longer possessed valid authorization. "He will assume I did this out of spite," I said. Maya looked at me. "Didn't you?" "Not entirely. Spite and accountability can occupy the same room." I almost smiled. The restaurant eventually accepted Vanessa's jewelry as temporary collateral, while lawyers arranged a payment guarantee. The engagement party ended with guests leaving through the rain, whispering about Marcus's financial trouble. 40 minutes later, the first security vehicle reached the mansion. The team presented the occupancy termination, court-backed inventory authorization, and evidence that Solstice Residential Holdings owned the property. Evelyn shouted that the house belonged to her son. Marcus called the documents fraudulent. Lydia attempted to lock herself in an upstairs bedroom. The security supervisor gave them 90 minutes to collect essential personal items while movers packed the rest for storage. I watched only a few minutes before turning off the screen. "No children are involved?" I asked. "None," Maya said. "The household staff received severance and transport assistance. Their wages are secured." "Good." At midnight, Adrian sent the preliminary board responses. 3 directors requested Marcus's immediate suspension. 2 resigned after learning Phoenix intended to investigate their support for unauthorized transactions. Halcyon stock could not trade overnight, but futures tied to its sector began falling after rumors of a capital withdrawal appeared online. I instructed the communications team to release no statement until morning. Silence had protected Marcus for years. Now it allowed uncertainty to spread around him without giving him anything to attack. At 1 a.m, he called my personal phone for the first time since I left the restaurant. I answered on the 5th ring. "What did you do?" he demanded. "No greeting, no apology. You will have to be more specific. The cards, the house, Phoenix. Someone is targeting me. Perhaps they reviewed your decisions. Do not play games. Your signature had that ridiculous bird beside it." And 20 minutes later, everything collapsed. "Who have you been talking to?" I looked across the city from the penthouse windows. "You said I contributed nothing. Why would anyone important listen to me?" He became quiet. I heard Evelyn shouting in the background and furniture moving across the marble floor. "Where are you?" "Somewhere I am allowed to stay. Call whoever you contacted and stop this. You are angry about Vanessa, but destroying my career will not make me take you back." Even then, he believed my actions revolved around being chosen by him. "I do not want you back. You are emotional." "No, Marcus. I was emotional for 5 years. Tonight I became precise." He lowered his voice. "Phoenix is threatening an emergency vote. Their CEO will not take my calls." "Do you know Adrian Bennett?" "Yes." "How?" "We have worked together." He laughed, though the sound lacked confidence. "You managed household investments, Clara. Do not exaggerate because you want to frighten me." "Then there is nothing to fear." I ended the call. He called 11 more times. I did not answer. At 2:15, a message arrived from Evelyn. "After everything we gave you, this is how you repay us?" Another followed. "The security men are throwing my clothes into boxes. Fix this immediately." Lydia sent photographs of luggage beneath the rain and accused me of elder abuse. Though Evelyn was 58 and perfectly healthy, Vanessa sent nothing. Her engagement photographs had disappeared from social media before dawn. I slept for 90 minutes. At 5, Maya woke me with coffee in a garment bag. Inside was a charcoal suit cut to my measurements, a white silk blouse, and the gold Phoenix pin traditionally worn by Phoenix Capital's controlling owner during formal board sessions. I had not worn it publicly in years. I attached my mother's ring to the chain beneath my blouse and placed the pin above my heart. In the mirror, I did not look transformed. I looked familiar. The woman Marcus called useless had always existed. She had simply spent 5 years standing behind someone else's chair. "The aircraft is ready," Maya said. Phoenix Capital's global headquarters occupied a private complex outside the city, with an executive airfield connected to the board building. The flight itself lasted only 23 minutes, but Adrian insisted on the arrival. because international directors and financial media had gathered after the emergency announcement. For 15 years, Phoenix's ultimate owner had remained unnamed. The fund's public documents identified a private trust, and speculation ranged from sovereign wealth to an alliance of old banking families. Adrian believed revealing my identity would stabilize the firm, prevent Marcus from portraying the intervention as a personal dispute, and end years of secrecy that had become more damaging than protective. "Are you ready?" he asked through the secure cabin screen. He was waiting on the runway with board members. "No," I said. "Good. People who feel ready for absolute power are usually the ones who should never have it." I looked at the city shrinking beneath the aircraft. "He will come. Marcus, he believes the mysterious owner can save him from you." Adrian smiled faintly. "He has requested a private audience with the chairman. Vanessa and Evelyn are with him. Let them wait in the main lobby." "How long?" "Until I arrive." The Phoenix headquarters had been designed around light, glass, and open courtyards because I never wanted power to feel like a locked room. When the plane landed, morning sun reflected across the wet runway. Executives, security staff, and several board members formed a line near the terminal. Adrian stood at the front wearing a dark blue suit. Although he was the public face of Phoenix Capital and one of the most respected financial leaders in the world, he had always rejected theatrical displays of submission. He shook hands, argued honestly, and called me Clara during private meetings. That morning, however, the company needed a clear image of authority. As the aircraft door opened, I saw Marcus through the terminal's glass wall. He stood in the lobby beside Vanessa and Evelyn, wearing the same tuxedo from the party beneath a wrinkled overcoat. His hair was uncombed. Evelyn carried 2 designer suitcases. Vanessa had changed into a cream dress and looked furious rather than frightened. They could see the runway but were too far away to distinguish my face immediately. I descended the stairs slowly. Camera shutters began clicking. Adrian walked toward me. When I reached the ground, he stopped, bowed his head, and said in a voice amplified by the nearby media microphones, "Welcome back, boss." The directors behind him repeated the greeting. "Welcome back, chairwoman." Through the glass, Marcus became completely still. Vanessa's mouth opened. Evelyn grabbed her son's arm. I walked beside Adrian toward the terminal while journalists shouted questions about my identity. Security opened the doors. The lobby fell silent. Marcus stared at the Phoenix pin, then at Adrian, then at me. His face changed through disbelief, calculation, fear, and something resembling grief. "Clara," he said. I stopped several feet away. "Good morning, Marcus." Evelyn stepped forward first. "What is this performance?" Adrian answered before I could. "Mrs. Miller, you are addressing Clara Vale Miller, founder, majority owner, and executive chair of Phoenix Capital." Evelyn shook her head. "That is impossible. She has never held a real job." Several employees nearby looked down to hide their reactions. Adrian's expression did not change. "Ms. Vale founded this firm 15 years ago with $30,000 and 2 distressed investments. Phoenix currently controls assets exceeding $180 billion. She designed the recovery model, used across our portfolio, and holds final authority over every voting position, including our 51% ownership of Halcyon Technologies." Marcus whispered, 51%. I said, "You thanked Phoenix for saving your company. You simply never asked who Phoenix was." Vanessa stepped between us. "If you owned Halcyon, why did you allow Marcus to run it?" "Because he once wanted to build something worthwhile." "And you hid this from your husband?" I hid the scale. I did not hide that I worked in investment. He preferred believing my work was insignificant. Marcus found his voice. "You lied to me for years." The accusation carried enough outrage that several people turned toward him in disbelief. "I protected your pride," I said. "That was a mistake. Lying would have been allowing you to believe you earned what you stole." He glanced toward Adrian. "I did not steal anything." Adrian handed a tablet to the senior legal director. The screen displayed unauthorized contracts, diverted consulting fees, hidden accounts, and promises made to Cole strategic partners. "Phoenix's audit suggests it's otherwise," he said. Vanessa looked at Marcus. "You said the contracts were approved. They would have been. You said the board supported the patent transfer." "I was about to become CEO." I said, "No, Marcus. You were about to announce a promotion Phoenix had never approved." The title existed only in a proposal submitted by directors currently under investigation. His face reddened. You let me celebrate it. You arranged the party before the vote. Because I knew the vote was guaranteed. You believed it was guaranteed because I had spent years preventing you from experiencing failure. Evelyn pointed at me. This is revenge because he chose someone better. The word better struck me with less force than it once would have. No. This is governance because he endangered a company employing 12,000 people. Marcus stepped closer. Security moved, but I lifted one hand. You could have told me, he said. Would it have changed how you treated me? Of course. That is the problem. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued, you should not need proof that your wife controls billions before deciding not to humiliate her. You should not require a corporate title before defending her from your mother. You should not discover respect only when disrespect becomes expensive. Evelyn's face hardened. We gave you a family. You gave me a role. A grateful poor woman who cooked, smiled, and disappeared whenever her existence threatened your son's image. We housed you. The house belonged to me. You wore our name. The name cost me more than it gave. Vanessa crossed her arms. You are enjoying this. I considered the accusation. Part of me is relieved. Enjoyment is too simple. Adrian announced that the emergency Halcyon board session would begin in 30 minutes. Marcus demanded the right to attend. As company president and shareholder, he retained limited rights pending suspension, so I allowed it. The meeting took place in Phoenix's largest glass conference room, visible from the central atrium. Directors joined in person and through secure video walls. Marcus sat alone on one side of the table. I sat at the head, with Adrian to my right and the legal team to my left. Vanessa and Evelyn remained outside because they held no official roles. For years, Marcus had imagined sitting in that room as an equal to Adrian Bennett. Instead, he faced the woman he had seated beside restaurant staff. The audit report required 2 hours. It showed that Halcyon's apparent growth depended almost entirely on Phoenix financing, insurance guarantees, acquisitions, and debt restructuring. Marcus's independent initiatives had produced large losses concealed through portfolio offsets. He had authorized misleading revenue projections, promised technology rights he lacked authority to transfer, and used company resources to fund personal travel with Vanessa. Several directors admitted they supported his promotion because he claimed Phoenix's owner approved it privately. He had forged no signature, but he had repeatedly implied access he did not possess. When asked to respond, Marcus said the results unfairly ignored his leadership. The company grew under me, he insisted. I opened the original recovery files. The company survived under capital I provided, strategy Adrian's team designed, and labor performed by employees you rarely credited. Leadership is not standing on a structure and claiming you poured the foundation. He turned toward the directors. This is a marital dispute disguised as corporate oversight. One director, a former engineer named Samuel Price, removed his glasses and said, I warned you for 3 years that the expansion schedule was reckless. Phoenix blocked the worst proposals. You told us the chairwoman lacked vision. Now we discover the chairwoman was your wife, and you did not even know she worked here. Marcus looked at me. You made me look like a fool. I did not arrange that outcome. The vote was decisive. Marcus was removed as president and director of Halcyon Technologies for breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized commitments, misuse of corporate assets, and material misrepresentation. His unvested compensation was canceled. Personal guarantees connected to improper expenses became immediately payable. Phoenix would retain the company, appoint professional management, preserve employee positions, and investigate further misconduct. When the result appeared on the screen, Marcus lowered his head. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I remembered the man at the library holding a vending machine coffee and trying to save 10 employees. Somewhere between that table and the glass boardroom, ambition had consumed every quality I once loved. What happens to me now? He asked. Adrian answered. That depends on the legal findings. I am asking my wife. I looked at the signed divorce agreement on the table. I am no longer your wife. The divorce is not final. The agreement is enforceable. And my attorneys filed an expedited petition after midnight. You signed because I pressured you. You insisted on witnesses. He rubbed both hands over his face. Clara, we need to speak privately. I agreed because I wanted one final conversation without an audience. We entered a smaller room overlooking the courtyard. Marcus stood near the window while I remained beside the door. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Was any part of our marriage real?" The question might have moved me if he had asked it, before accusing me of deception. My part was, he turned. "You watched me struggle while you controlled everything. You were not struggling. You were being supported without knowing the source. That is manipulation, perhaps. But I never used the support to demand obedience. I wanted you to succeed. You wanted me dependent. No, I wanted you safe. I should have allowed you to fail honestly." He laughed bitterly. "You speak as though you are morally superior. I am not. I abandoned my own life to preserve your comfort. I concealed truth because I feared your insecurity. I allowed your family to mistreat me because I wanted love more than dignity. Those were my failures. Then we both made mistakes. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You brought your mistress to that anniversary, seated your wife with servers, and forced her to sign a divorce agreement before proposing to another woman. That was a decision supported by planning, lawyers, invitations, and 200 witnesses." He looked away. "Vanessa was part of the promotion strategy. Was sleeping with her also strategy? It began that way. His honesty was uglier than a denial. You married me because I believed in you when you had nothing. You married me while hiding that you had everything. Phoenix was not everything. You were." He pressed one hand against the window. "I could have handled the truth. You could not handle my salary exceeding yours. That was years ago. And you spent those years calling me dependent." He turned suddenly. "Because you acted dependent. You let me pay for everything. I paid for almost everything through entities you did not recognize. How was I supposed to know?" "You were not. But you knew. I managed investments. You could have asked about my day. You could have listened when I discussed markets instead of telling me to focus on dinner. You could have defended me when your mother called me trash. You did not need balance sheets to recognize I was human." His expression broke for the first time. "I was ashamed. Of me, of myself. Every time you understood something faster, I felt like the struggling man in the library again. I wanted to become someone you could not outgrow. So you made me smaller. I thought if you needed me, you would stay. I stayed until you decided even my dependence embarrassed you." He crossed the space between us but stopped before touching me. "We can fix this. I will end things with Vanessa. I will apologize publicly. We can rebuild Halcyon together. You still think Halcyon is the center of the story. Then tell me what you want." The answer arrived with unexpected clarity. "Peace. I can give you that. You had 5 years. Clara, please." I looked at the man I once loved and felt grief without desire. "At the restaurant? You called me useless because you believed I could do nothing to affect your life. Now you are asking me to return because you know I can affect everything. Neither version is love." He began crying quietly. I had never seen Marcus cry, not even at his father's funeral. For one dangerous moment, old instincts urged me to comfort him. I remembered my mother's ring against my chest. Gold survives heat by remaining what it is, not by returning to the fire. "You said I was trash," I continued. "Your mother said I should be grateful for food and clothing. Perhaps you were both right about one thing. I spent 5 years picking up something broken and convincing myself it was treasure. I will not do that anymore." He flinched. "You think I am trash? I think you chose to become something I can no longer carry." I opened the door. "Return to where you belong, Marcus. Not the street, not poverty, not humiliation. Return to responsibility. For the first time in years, face the cost of your own decisions without expecting me to pay it." He did not follow me. Outside the boardroom, Vanessa waited near the elevators. Evelyn had left after learning the mansion would not be restored. Vanessa approached me alone. "Did Marcus tell you the affair began as a business arrangement?" "Yes. He said you were emotionally cold and refused to support his career. He told me you were only a consultant." Her face tightened. "He told me Phoenix's owner wanted him as CEO. He told everyone what they needed to hear." She looked toward the closed room. "Will my father's firm be investigated if it participated in unauthorized transactions? Can I negotiate with you through counsel? I did not know who you were. You knew I was his wife." She looked down. "Would knowing your position have changed how I treated you? That question is yours to answer." She left without another word. I later learned she ended the engagement before noon and cooperated with investigators to reduce her own exposure. Her father's firm paid a substantial settlement and surrendered the patent rights Marcus had promised. Vanessa lost several board appointments, but avoided criminal charges. I never considered her innocent, yet I also refused to make her the central villain. Marcus had made vows to me, she had not. The greater betrayal belonged to the person who knew exactly what my trust cost. News of my identity spread across financial media before the board meeting ended. Old photographs surfaced, me leaving a regional bank, standing behind Adrian during Phoenix's first acquisition, speaking at a closed economic conference under my maiden name, and attending charity events beside Marcus while journalists labeled me his quiet wife. Commentators debated whether I had deceived the public, whether my privacy represented brilliant strategy, and whether a woman controlling such wealth could genuinely have endured mistreatment at home. People often imagine power protects a person from abuse. It does not. Power unused is invisible. And emotional wounds do not consult financial statements. I could dismantle a corporation with one directive, and still spend years doubting whether I deserved respect at my own dinner table. That contradiction embarrassed me until letters began arriving from women who understood it. Executives wrote that their families called them selfish for succeeding. Business owners admitted husbands controlled their personal money. Women with advanced degrees described pretending not to understand things so men would not feel threatened. Others had no wealth at all, but recognized the slow erosion of being told gratitude required silence. The story became viral not because a secret billionaire punished a cruel husband, but because people recognized the moment when invisible labor refused to remain invisible. Still, justice was less immediate and cleaner than headlines suggested. Marcus did not become penniless overnight. He retained personal clothing, certain savings unconnected to misconduct, and the right to legal representation. The mansion was reclaimed, but his belongings entered storage rather than being thrown into the mud. He rented a small apartment after several hotels refused his cards. Evelyn stayed with Lydia, whose husband resented the arrangement. Their social circle disappeared quickly. Invitations stopped, charity boards requested resignations, and people who once laughed at Evelyn's insults claimed they had always found her cruel. I learned that public shame creates dishonest witnesses. Everyone wants to stand near justice after it becomes fashionable. Halcyon recovered under new leadership. We appointed a former operations director named Aisha Grant as chief executive. Marcus had repeatedly ignored her recommendations because he considered her too cautious. Within a year, she reduced debt, restored employee trust, and released a product Marcus had delayed because Vanessa's firm could not profit from it. I asked Aisha whether she wanted the company to remain independent from Phoenix. She said independence required strength, not abandonment. We created a plan allowing employees to acquire a meaningful ownership share over time. The people who built Halcyon would finally benefit from its recovery. My divorce became final 4 months after the restaurant incident. Marcus challenged the agreement briefly, claiming coercion, but video evidence showed he controlled the event, selected the witnesses, and demanded my signature. The Phoenix symbol did not change the legal terms. It merely activated internal rights I already possessed. My own attorneys ensured I claimed no portion of his lawful personal assets beyond the return of wages he had moved from our accounts. I did not need his money. I needed the record to reject his assertion that I had contributed nothing. During mediation, financial experts documented millions in value generated by unpaid strategic work I performed for Halcyon before Phoenix's investment. I chose not to pursue compensation. Instead, the final decree included a statement acknowledging that I had provided substantial professional and financial support throughout the marriage. It was only one paragraph, but reading it healed something I had not expected a legal document to reach. Marcus signed it without looking at me. Afterward, he asked whether we could have coffee one last time. I declined. Closure had already occurred in the small room at Phoenix headquarters. Repetition would not make it more complete. Evelyn sent me a handwritten apology 6 months later. She said losing the mansion had forced her to reconsider how she treated people without wealth. The letter then asked whether I could release a family trust Phoenix had frozen during the audit. I returned it through counsel without a personal response. An apology tied to a financial request is a negotiation wearing softer clothes. Lydia publicly criticized me for destroying the family and privately requested a position at one of my foundations. She received neither argument nor employment. I stopped measuring healing by whether the people who harmed me learned anything. Their transformation was no longer my responsibility. Returning to Phoenix full-time required more adjustment than exposing Marcus. The company had grown while I remained partially hidden. Thousands of employees knew Adrian as their leader. Some welcomed me enthusiastically. Others feared I would undermine a structure that worked. I did not demand immediate loyalty. I spent 6 months visiting divisions, listening to analysts, factory workers, portfolio managers, administrators, and the employees who cleaned our offices before sunrise. I discovered decisions I agreed with and policies I hated. Privacy had protected me, but it had also allowed distance to form between my intentions and the institution carrying them out. One acquisition team had begun using aggressive layoffs, contrary to Phoenix's original principles. A senior partner justified it by saying the anonymous owner valued returns above sentiment. I removed him and restored the worker protection rules. Power delegated without visible values can be claimed by anyone. Adrian remained CEO. He offered to resign so I could take the title, but I refused. "You built the public institution," I told him. "I am not returning to take what you earned. Everything here began with you. Beginnings do not own every chapter." I became executive chair and chief investment architect, roles that allowed us to lead together. During our first public shareholders meeting, Adrian introduced me simply. "This is Clara Vale, founder of Phoenix Capital and the person I have called boss for 15 years. The audience stood. I thought of Marcus introducing Vanessa as his strategic partner while I carried a tray. The contrast was almost too perfect, the kind of symmetry storytellers invent because real life rarely provides it. Yet applause did not feel as satisfying as I expected. Recognition cannot refund time. It can only illuminate what the time contained. I had not lost 5 years entirely. I learned the danger of becoming indispensable to someone who refused to acknowledge dependence. I learned that silence can preserve dignity in one moment and enable abuse in another. I learned that loving someone's potentials is not the same as living safely with their choices. Most importantly, I learned that power does not become virtuous merely because it belongs to the wounded. During the freeze protocol, I could have left the Millers with nothing, humiliated them publicly, released private messages, and transformed their suffering into entertainment. Some advisors encouraged it because audiences love total destruction. I chose accountability instead. Assets acquired through improper guarantees were reclaimed. Jobs were protected. Personal property was inventoried. Legal rights remained intact. Revenge seeks helplessness. Justice restores weight to consequences. The distinction mattered because I did not want Marcus's cruelty to become a blueprint for my own authority. My mother's ring remained with me through every board session. She had raised me alone in a neighborhood where eviction notices appeared more often than birthday cards. She cleaned offices at night and repaired clothing during the day. When I was 16, she became ill but hid the diagnosis because treatment costs frightened her. I discovered the truth only after she collapsed at work. Before she died, she apologized for leaving me with debt instead of security. I told her she had given me more than money. At the time, I meant love and discipline. Years later, I understood she also gave me a distrust of systems that treat vulnerable people as numbers. Phoenix's investments philosophy came from watching employers discard her when illness reduced her productivity. Every company we acquired had to answer a question beyond profitability. Could its recovery preserve dignity for the people whose labor created its value? Marcus once admired that principle. Later, he called it sentimental weakness. Halcyon's recovery proved him wrong. Employee ownership increased productivity, turnover fell, and the company became more profitable than it had ever been under him. The financial press called it the Phoenix Renewal. I called it evidence that strength did not require humiliation. 1 year after the divorce, I returned to Maison Étoile for a private dinner honoring scholarship recipients from my mother's neighborhood. Daniel, the waiter who opened the service door for me, had become assistant manager. When he saw me, he appeared nervous and apologized again for the anniversary night. I told him he had been the only person in that ballroom who treated me normally. Through our foundation, he later received support to study hospitality management. I did not help him because he had been kind to a powerful woman in disguise. I helped him because he had shown kindness when he believed I possessed no power at all. That is the truest test of character I know. The restaurant had preserved the silver tray from the event after media requests turned it into an infamous object. The manager asked whether I wanted it. I almost refused. Then I took it to Phoenix headquarters and placed it in the Employee Learning Center beside a small plaque. Never confuse service with servitude. The tray reminded me that there was no shame in carrying food, cleaning rooms, managing a home, or supporting another person. The shame belonged to those who used necessary work as proof that the worker had less worth. My years as Marcus's wife were not degrading because I cooked or organized his life. They became degrading when he accepted the labor while denying the person performing it. 3 years later, I saw Marcus again at a financial ethics conference. He had completed a settlement related to Halcyon's misuse of funds and avoided prison by cooperating with regulators. He worked as an operations consultant for small companies, under strict restrictions preventing him from serving as an officer of a public corporation. He looked older, thinner, and less polished. After my speech, he waited near a quiet corridor and asked whether he could speak for 1 minute. I agreed. I watched the presentation, he said. Halcyon is doing well. Yes, Aisha was always capable. She was. He looked down. I should have listened to her. I waited. I should have listened to you. Yes. The answer surprised him. Perhaps he expected me to soften the truth. I have been in therapy, he said. I know that does not repair anything. No, but it may prevent repetition. Vanessa testified against me. I know. My mother still blames you. I assumed she would. I do not. He raised his eyes. Not anymore. I could see effort in his face, but I no longer felt responsible for rewarding it. That is useful for your future, I said. It does not change our past. I understand. He hesitated. Were you ever happy with me? I considered the library, supermarket flowers, late-night spreadsheets, and the young man who once cared about 10 employees. Yes, I said. That was why the ending hurt. Tears filled his eyes, but he held them back. I am sorry, Clara. It was the first apology he offered without asking me to rescue him from a consequence. I accepted it as information, not invitation. I hope you become someone who understands why, I said. Then I left. Forgiveness came later and privately. It did not mean restoring contact, removing consequences, or pretending the marriage contained less harm than it did. It meant Marcus no longer occupied the central room of my mind. I could remember him without conducting another trial. I could acknowledge the love we once shared without using it to excuse what followed. I could let his future belong to him. Mine had already become larger than the identity I abandoned. Phoenix opened investment academies in underserved communities, offering training and seed funding to people traditional banks ignored. We supported women who had left careers for caregiving and needed pathways back into professional life. One program helped spouses document unpaid contributions to family businesses so they could not be legally erased during divorce. I named it the Ember Initiative because not every fire becomes a phoenix immediately. Sometimes survival begins as one protected spark. During the first graduation ceremony, a woman in her 50s approached me. She had worked without salary in her husband's construction company for 27 years and was told she owned nothing when he left her. Through the program, she established her contribution, secured a fair settlement, and opened her own firm. She held my hands and said, "I thought silence made me dignified." I answered, "Sometimes it does. Sometimes it only makes other people comfortable." That sentence described my marriage more accurately than any court filing. The phrase useless wife followed me through interviews because media companies understood its emotional power. They wanted a dramatic transformation from invisible homemaker to financial ruler. I corrected them whenever possible. I had never been useless, and I had never transformed overnight. The boardroom authority, the aircraft, the capital, and the deference existed before the restaurant. The only overnight change was my decision to stop hiding them for a man who used my humility as evidence of inferiority. People often wait for a dramatic rescue, a secret account, a powerful ally, a hidden identity. Most lives do not contain those things. But the central truth does not require billions. Worth does not begin when those who dismissed you discover your power. A person cleaning a house, raising children, supporting a partner, serving food, or working without applause does not need a grand reveal to become valuable. The reveal only exposes the blindness of people who failed to see what was already there. On the 5th anniversary of the freeze protocol, Adrian announced his retirement. He had delayed it repeatedly because he feared leaving Phoenix during my private years. At the farewell dinner, he handed me the original fountain pen used to sign our first investment agreement. Its black casing had been repaired twice, and the gold clip was scratched. "You drew the first Phoenix with this," he said. I remembered sitting in a rented office with faulty heating, signing documents for a manufacturing company no bank wanted. "You called me reckless. You were reckless. You invested anyway." I had recently been fired and possessed poor judgment. We laughed. During his speech, Adrian spoke about the morning I returned. "The world believes I bowed because Clara controlled Phoenix," he said. "I bowed because for 15 years I watched her carry power without needing to place it on someone else's neck. That is rarer than wealth." His words moved me more deeply than the magazines, awards, and valuations that followed. Authority can force obedience. Character earns voluntary respect. After his retirement, I became chief executive as well as chairwoman, though I continued calling him for advice. The first time he answered from a fishing boat and refused to discuss markets, I knew he had finally learned to rest. I did too, eventually. I purchased a modest house near the coast. Not through a subsidiary or corporate trust, but directly in my own name. It had broad windows, weathered wood, and a kitchen smaller than the one in Marcus's mansion. I cooked because I enjoyed it, invited people who helped clear the table, and wore my mother's ring openly. There were no rooms designed to impress strangers. On stormy nights, I listened to rain against the roof and remembered walking from Maison Étoile toward the waiting Rolls-Royce. That moment is often described as the beginning of my revenge. It was not. It was the end of my negotiation with disrespect. Revenge came from anger. My decision came from clarity. I did not activate the freeze protocol to prove Marcus had married a powerful woman. I activated it because the institutions I controlled could no longer be used to fund deception, theft, and humiliation. The personal and corporate consequences occurred together because Marcus had woven them together. He financed his betrayal with company resources, used his promotion to legitimize his affair, and demanded divorce as part of an unauthorized strategic alliance. Removing my support did not destroy a healthy structure. It revealed that the structure had never stood without me. The last item connected to our marriage arrived in a storage box 7 years after the divorce. Halcyon employees discovered it during renovation of Marcus's former office. Inside were old library receipts, the first cash flow plan I wrote for him, and a faded photograph of us sitting on the floor of his original workspace, eating takeout. On the back, Marcus had written, "Clara believes I can build something that lasts." I sat with the photograph for a long time. The woman in it looked tired, hopeful, and entirely certain love could turn potential into character. I did not despise her. She had not been foolish for believing in someone. Her mistake was assuming belief could substitute for his choices. I kept the photograph, not as a memorial to the marriage, but as proof that my tenderness existed before betrayal and survived it. Strength did not require killing that part of me. It required offering it more carefully. When young investors ask about the most important decision of my career, they expect me to name a famous acquisition or market prediction. I tell them it was learning when to withdraw capital. Investment is often described as the courage to commit resources, but for preserve value, also requires recognizing when additional support only delays accountability. I applied that lesson to companies long before I applied it to my marriage. Marcus was not destroyed because I withdrew support. He was exposed because my support had been concealing weakness he refused to address. The same principle saved Halcyon. We continued investing in employees, technology, and ethical leadership while removing the executive who treated protection as entitlement. Capital should strengthen what can grow, not permanently insulate what chooses decay. That philosophy became the foundation of Phoenix's next era. Years later, a journalist asked whether I regretted not revealing my identity to Marcus before the wedding. I said yes and no. Honesty might have exposed his insecurity sooner. It might have prevented the marriage, the secret acquisition, and 5 years of erasure. Yet wealth can distort relationships even when disclosed. I wanted to be loved without the weight of Phoenix, and Marcus wanted to feel superior without earning it. Our hidden motives fit together until they became destructive. I now believe intimacy requires truth even when truth risks rejection. Anyone whose love depends on your reduction is already rejecting you. The journalist then asked whether I would draw the phoenix symbol again if I could return to the restaurant. Yes, I said, but I would draw it sooner, not on the divorce paper. On the first evening, Marcus remained silent while Evelyn called me inferior. On the first day, he mocked my work because it threatened him. On the first night, I altered a business decision to preserve his ego. Boundaries delayed become permissions in the minds of people who benefit from their absence. That was the hardest lesson. The most satisfying part of my story was not seeing Marcus kneel, though he did kneel in the Phoenix lobby after the board meeting, away from cameras, begging me to restore the house for his mother. It was not hearing Adrian call me boss, though the word returned my name to a part of myself I had abandoned. It was not watching a credit card decline or seeing the mansion emptied before dawn. Those moments were dramatic, but drama fades. The true victory was waking one morning months later and realizing I no longer argued around Marcus's approval. I chose my work, clothing, meals, friendships, and silence without wondering whether they would make another person feel diminished. Freedom was not the Rolls-Royce, it was the absence of permission. People still repeat the sentence I spoke to Marcus during our private meeting in a harsher form. You called me trash because I spent 5 years picking up a piece of trash like you. Now return to where you belong. The version became popular because it offered a sharp ending. The truth was quieter. I did not believe Marcus belonged in the trash. I believed he belonged with the consequences he created. Dehumanizing him would have repeated the logic he used against me. I had been treated as an object, a burden, a servant, and an accessory. I would not reclaim myself by turning someone else into an object. Yet I understand why people remember the harsher sentence. Anger often needs a language before healing can offer a better one. For a while, I needed it too. Today, the gold Phoenix pin rests inside a glass case in my office beside my mother's ring and Adrian's pen. I wear the pin only for major decisions. The ring remains with me every day. The pen no longer writes smoothly, but I refuse to replace it. Together, the three objects represent what power should remember, where it came from, whom it serves, and when it must be used. On the wall behind my desk hangs no portrait of me. Instead, there is a photograph of Phoenix Capital's first rescued factory. Workers stand outside beneath a damaged sign, smiling because the company reopened after 6 months of closure. Marcus once asked why I cared so much about people whose names I did not know. I answered that every balance sheet contains lives hidden beneath the numbers. He called the idea sentimental. Perhaps it was. Sentiment built Phoenix into an institution powerful enough to save Halcyon from the man who mocked it. I no longer consider tenderness the opposite of strength. Tenderness without judgment can become self-erasure, but strength without tenderness becomes the kind of power that sat me beside the serving staff and laughed. The two must govern each other. That balance is the legacy I want, not the story of a wife who secretly owned billions. Wealth can vanish, markets can collapse, and reputations can reverse by morning. Character remains after the accounts freeze. On the night Marcus rejected me, I left Maison Étoile believing a 5-year marriage had ended. In truth, a longer captivity ended with it. The belief that love must be earned through usefulness, that silence always proves dignity, and that making myself smaller could keep another person from leaving. Marcus left anyway. Evelyn despised me anyway. Vanessa stood beside him anyway. My sacrifice did not produce loyalty, because sacrifice cannot purchase what character refuses to give. Once I understood that, the rain no longer felt like punishment. It washed away the role they had assigned me. I stepped into the Rolls-Royce not as a hidden billionaire returning to her throne, but as a woman finally willing to occupy her own life. The company, board, aircraft, and bowed CEO were external confirmations of a decision already made beneath the restaurant awning. I was done asking people who benefited from my invisibility to admit that I existed. The world learned my name the following morning, when Adrian bowed on the runway and welcomed his boss home. But I had returned to myself the night before, when Marcus threw divorce papers onto my tray, called me useless, and waited for me to beg. I signed. I drew the phoenix. I walked away in silence. Then, for the first time in 5 years, I allowed the consequences to speak for me. Goodbye.